Alright, silicon carbide, the wafer that fuels electric revolution. It's tougher than silicon, powers faster cars, and runs cooler chips. But have you ever wondered, why is this 8-inch silicon carbide wafer so expensive? Let's break it down. What drives the cost of a silicon carbide wafer? Alright, so what actually makes silicon carbide wafer so expensive? It mostly comes down to 4 big things. The graphite, the material that holds everything together in a furnace. Seed crystal, the DNA of the wafer. Post-processing, all the slicing, polishing, and cleaning that turns a raw crystal into something usable. And finally, electricity, the silent but very real cost, especially in Europe. Each one of these adds weight to the final price tag. Let's break it down. So let's start with graphite, the furnace's foundation. Western companies have mastered their graphite. Their crucible lasts longer, resists defects, and perform consistently. But in China, they play a different game. Speed and volume are the main factors. Because raw graphite comes from China, it's cheaper to buy several crucibles and swap them out, even if each one wears out faster. Low quality, yes, but also lower cost. And lower cost mean more experiments and more data, faster learning. One side optimizes endurance, the other optimizes iterations. Which one wins? Depends if you value marathon or sprint. Number 2, seed crystals and the starting point. Seeds are like the DNA of a wafer. In Europe and US, these are tightly guarded, only available to a few players. In China, seeds are accessible on the open market, which means anyone with the ambition can start growing their own crystals. This explains exactly why you see so many players in the emerging market like in China. More seeds means more engineers growing wafers, failing, improving, and repeating. And the more labs you run, the better your driving gets. Access to seed doesn't just create competition, it accelerates skill building across an entire industry. Let's move on to the third, post-processing and the hidden giant. So after the crystal growth, the boule must be flattened and rounded into pucks, such that wafers can be sliced, cleaned, and polished. Precision is everything. One tiny scratch or particle can ruin the entire wafer. But here's something interesting. 1/3 of the crystal puck is lost during the slicing process. That's like throwing away 1/3 of your cake just to cut it properly. 2 slicing methods are currently dominating the market. The traditional wire cutting versus the laser cutting. Laser cutting is technically faster, cleaner, and heavily bet on by China, especially for future 12-inch wafers. Polishing machines at even more cost, often exceeding crystal growth furnaces itself. This is why post-processing can eat up as much margin as the crystal growth itself. It is the step that makes or breaks profitability. The last one, electricity, the silent cost. Now, did you know that growing silicon carbide crystal requires a massive amount of energy? Unlike in China, in Europe for instance, electricity prices can significantly raise wafer costs. So production location isn't just about talent or equipment, it's also about energy economics. A country with cheaper electricity suddenly looks much more competitive and attractive. When people talk about reshoring or independence in semiconductors, energy prices aren't just background noise, they are strategies. Furnaces, Formula 1 of wafer growth. The furnace itself, not that expensive. Pretty much any country can build one. The real value lies in how you use it. Think of it like a Formula 1. The furnace is your car and the engineer is your driver. You can own the fastest F1 car on the grid, but without the driver, you are not winning the race. Now here is where the yield comes in. In wafer production, speed is your yield of P-grade wafers, the ones that make it through the defect-free. The higher your yield, the faster your car. Same furnace, same raw material, but one engineer gets 30% yield and the other pushes for 50% yield. That's the difference between breaking even and taking the podium. Now, just to compare China and the West, because they approach this race very differently. China pushes for volume, more labs, more practice runs, learning by doing, and the West guards its process secrets tightly, optimizing every turn to extract the maximum yield. One side drives fast and learn by crashing, and the other side cautiously but consistently scores points. Both teams are on the same track. The question is, which strategy gets them to the championship first? Let's move on to market dynamics and strategy. Graphite supply, seed access, furnace know-how, and post-processing skills all come together to shape the silicon carbide market. China bets on scale, which means cheaper graphite, available seeds, and a push towards laser cutting. They aim for speed, iteration, and cost advantage. On the other hand, the West bets on process mastery, tighten IP protection, longer lasting materials, and maximizing yield per crystal. Neither approach is wrong. One accelerates industry-wide learning, the other one secures consistent quality. Both are needed to move silicon carbide forward. At the end of the day, can we have the best of both worlds? I think that is the question that needs to be answered. The conclusion of this video. From graphite to seed, from furnace to post-processing, every step in silicon carbide wafer production adds cost, complexity, and opportunity. At first glance, wafer may look like a commodity, one slice of crystal like another. But in reality, the true value lies in the process knowledge, yield optimization, and the strategies nations and companies use to compete. So, the next time you see a silicon carbide wafer, don't just think about what it costs. Think about the race, the drivers, and the strategy behind it, because that's what really shapes the future of this industry.